What's up, you guys?
Sorry.
Right before we decided to go live,
Kids are
like,
let the dog
hey, can we let the dog in? The answer is no. Alright guys, so we moved to a new location. Hopefully it's not echoey. This room has a tall ceiling. So we brought out a whiteboard. Things are getting real, you guys. So back in the day, every day we had to write on a whiteboard. So we're going to start. So today we're talking about the straw that broke the camel's back. So we're going to start with a story. I'm going to tell you a story, and then Brandon's going to get all science guy for you tonight, and I'm probably just going to stand here. Just kidding. All right, so I don't know, 7 years ago. We'll say it was 7 years ago. It seems like a long time ago. I was getting ready to go to the gym. I reached back to unplug my Christmas tree and had this like horrible pop in my shoulder. Ended up, it was like a semi-torn rotator cuff. So the plug was in a weird place, and I was rotated and pulled, and it was like, oh my gosh, I tore my rotator cuff unplugging my Christmas tree. Well, the truth of the matter was that was the final straw that did whatever was going on with my shoulder. That was the final straw, but it really wasn't that one incident. So we want to talk to you today about load versus capacity, and how even in relationships, in your body, all of these stressors build together, and then it's just like one thing that we think happened, but it's really not that. So we want to give you guys a big picture on how this all goes together, and if we know we always have people kind of going through this stuff. So talking about how this all works together. Obviously in the Shift Project, we talk about there's no one thing that isn't connected to everything else. So Brandon's going to draw you guys a fantastic visualization, explain it all. I'll be back and forth checking comments. So if you do have comments and questions, drop them here. We can't see them until I go to the other side.
So with that being said, you guys, so the goal of today is be able to illustrate and kind of show how everything we've been talking about for the last 34 episodes of what we've been going through, of understanding that everything corresponds and basically talks and communicates to each other. And what we see oftentimes with people that come to us in the gym setting is like, oh, that last pull-up, it repped my shoulder, right? Oh, that last rep of my deadlift, that last squat I did, that last whatever, that one just pushed me over the top. And the goal of today, you guys, is to be able to illustrate that that's not necessarily true. It's kind of like the same thing we talk about if I go out for drinks, right? If I go out a night on the town and we go crazy and I have 20 beers, and then all of a sudden I have that one last shot, it was like that one last shot put me on my ass, right? It was like, well, no, it was all the accumulation of everything that got me to that point, right? But
I like to see Brandon drink.
That wouldn't work out very well. I smell beer nowadays and I feel wrecked. But it's the accumulation of everything else stacking on top of itself that gets us to that point, that gets us over the tipping point and breaks the camel's back with that straw breaking, right? And it's the same thing with your relationships, right? It was that last argument that finally made me the decision to leave. No, it was all the other stuff leading up to that point that finally that reached your capacity and pushed you over, and you said done with it, right? And so every decision, everything that happens in our life is a result of this, okay? So we're finishing up our conversation talking about movement. So I'm gonna relate a lot of this to like movement, but you can replace a lot of the titles with other things in your life, right? So as I'm going through with this, just want to be able to illustrate that and get you guys understanding a little better, okay? So this is what we refer to as load versus capacity, okay? So at the bottom here, the graph's going to indicate or kind of designate my load, all right? And then my capacity, so you can think of my capacity line is essentially anything over that. If I'm talking on a physical standpoint, right, like I'm all good living my life, and perhaps I walk outside and I walk into oncoming traffic unknowingly, and boom, I get hit by a bus, right? Like that's probably going to exceed what my capacity is for me to still be on this planet, right? Like as much as I don't want to think so, it probably is, right? Now, oftentimes, I'm not gonna say all the time, because sometimes this may not elicit a pain. But for some of you guys that may like experience low back pain, may experience knee pain, may experience shoulder pain, this could be a good indication of things that may be going on for you to get a better picture of what's happening, okay? So the reason why I say sometimes is because say I'm doing a lift, right? Like I'm testing my shoulder press, okay? I'm seeing how much weight I can press from my shoulder over my head, right? Like I can do 100 pounds, no problem. I put 101 pounds on there, it's like, not gonna happen, right? So that was my capacity. Did that mean there was pain involved with it? No, but that was my capacity as far as my strength goes, all right? Now, what we see often, and we're seeing this more and more with a lot of our clients going on, is like, oh, my shoulders are killing me, my low back's happening, my knees are going on. Well, have you been doing anything abnormal? Well, yeah, due to the quarantine, I've been, house ridden, I haven't been doing anything. Well, have you been doing anything physical? No, but I just did something to my shoulder, my low back, I did something. Well, unless you were out doing cartwheels or back handsprings or something that caused like this actual effect, there's other underlying reasons for it, okay? So just going to kind of represent first over here off to the side, just give you kind of an idea of how this all stacks and how it all relates, okay? Now, the first box I'm going to draw here, all right? So I'm going to draw it out. I'm going to probably kind of abbreviate some of the wording on here. I have a chart just because I always forget something on here. So the first box is going to be your anatomical deficiencies, okay?
To relate this to my story, my deficiency was I had no flexibility in my shoulders. So my deficiency still is flexibility.
So you can look at this as kind of like that, right? Like it could be the herniated disc you have, your knee that you hurt, you rolled your ankle, right? The scar tissue you have, the labrum tear. You stubbed your toe and you walked around and you have a discrepancy problem, right? Like we all have anatomical deficiencies because of life and our experiences. The part that we need to kind of wrap our head around with is there's other people out there that have the same symptoms or the same, I'm going to say issue, deficiency, but they don't have pain, right? And so I want to kind of, we get kind of wrapped up in the diagnosis of things that we have, right? Like we get that like placebo side of like, you have this, so i.e. that means I have this problem, I have this pain associated with it. That's not necessarily true. Oftentimes, yet again, there's for whatever issue you have, there are other people walking around on this planet that aren't experiencing pain as well. And so hopefully this can illustrate that a little bit better for you, okay? So anatomical deficiencies, that's what that's relating to, all right? The next one on there, that's going to be your sleep, rest, and recovery box, okay? Or I'm sorry, your stress, rest, and recovery.
Anybody having a little extra stress right now? So, probably not, yes. Right? No stress. There's nothing going on in the world.
Rest, yes.
I'm
sorry, no. Your stress, diet, and sleep. Sorry.
Oh.
That would just
all the other things we've been talking about. So, stress, diet, and sleep. Well, we've been talking about this, right? So, how many people right now, we're all more stressed because there's so much uncertainty in the world. Probably our nourishment, we spent a whole week talking about that, isn't exactly what it was or maybe as good as it should be. And maybe you're not sleeping well because you're worried about stuff or your whole routine is thrown off. So right now, there's a lot of this happening for almost everyone in the world.
So think of this also, the same thing that Courtney was just talking about there. Think of this as your hormonal box, right? Think of, basically, when we're in good health, you guys, your hormones are on kind of a homeostatic, on an even keel, right? We're not getting highs, we're not getting lows, we're not kind of riding the wave of that, right? Like when we're minimizing stress, your cortisol levels aren't all over the place, your fight or flight isn't bouncing all over the place. When you're eating, when you're having a nourished diet, like we just got done, what was that, a week and a half, last week, 2 weeks ago, talking about nourishment, right? When you're getting adequate sleep, like if you guys, for all the guys out there, if you want to increase your testosterone, your hormone, your HGH, your testosterone, get more sleep. Right, like I talked about that being one of my bad habits that I don't do very well, but sleep can fix a lot of problems very, very quickly, even despite your stress and your diet being not necessarily ideal. So if you get more sleep, this will help with that box.
You guys do me a favor, raise your hand, drop a comment below if you struggle with sleep. We'll put this on our radar of something to talk about and the reasons why maybe you struggle with sleep and how to do it. So drop us a comment, drop us a note if you struggle with sleep, or if you're like, my head hits the pillow and I'm out, tell us that too.
So the next box is going to be your functional diagnosis. So your functional diagnosis. And so that's why I said a lot of these things isn't necessarily getting wrapped up in. It's like, oh, my shoulder hurts. Oh, it's because I got this rotator cuff thing, or I got this labrum tendon. It's like, well, no, we have a problem when you perform shoulder press, right? Like, oh, I got my knees bummed up, right? Like I tore my ACL, I got my MCL. It was like, that may be, but when you squat, you have knee discomfort, right? And so that's what we mean by functional diagnosis, is when you perform a movement or when you perform something along those lines, you have discomfort, you have pain essentially on there. It's not necessarily what specifically is the issue, but under a functional movement type of screening, you have some sort of discomfort, pain associated with it.
I don't have anything on that, sorry.
So,
I got nothing.
On top. So these boxes, you guys, are stuff that we wake up all before the time you hit the alarm to the time you get up. This is already stuff that you have within your life, right? Like this is something that's already been there for your life. This is something that you're dealing with right now, and this is something that is just there because of what the movement pattern, what all these things are on there. So when you initially wake up, hit the alarm clock, these boxes are already being filled before you have a chance to do anything with it, okay?
You're already behind the eight ball.
And then on top of that is where we stack our life on top of it, right? So you may have a drive to and from work, right? Like that may be stop and go traffic, right? You may have an 8-hour workday. So obviously this is going to adjust given our current scenario, but just filling in the boxes, okay? And then say you're after your 8-hour workday and having lunch and all the other stuff that kind of corresponds with that, you go to the gym, right? And so you go to the gym, you perform, squats, push-ups, whatever. You go, it's always that one thing, you start to maybe do a run. That's a pun. And then all of a sudden, I go to do that one extra little, deadlift or pull-up or whatever that apparatus for you. And all of a sudden it's like, oh no, I did a deadlift. You can also look at this as picking up your clothes basket. That's a deadlift, all right? Oh no, that put me over my capacity. So the result of that, anytime I do this movement, that is what causes me problems, right? Like every time I do that, I can't, that's what really does me in. Every time that Courtney unplugs her Christmas tree, that's what does her in, right? Like anytime I do a push-up, anytime I pick up my kids, that's what does me in. But what we neglect to look at, you guys, is it's all the compounding effects that got me to my capacity line, and it was that one little thing that I last did that got me over, and that's what I draw the conclusion on of, oh no, that's what caused the problem, where instead of looking at the entirety of what is happening, all right? Now, why that's important is because we're talking about these boxes here, you guys. These are your lifestyle boxes, okay? Now, what typically goes to happen, okay, and what typically happens on this, you guys, is as we go through, right, like you may go to a physician, you may go to a doctor, you may go to those things. I'm not saying that's bad, right? We want to go to a professional that understands these things, understands what they're doing. But what happens on there is you go there, and oftentimes like, okay, what were you doing, right? Like, you tell your doctor, like, I was doing this, I was doing running, I was jumping, and then all of a sudden I did a deadlift, and all of a sudden, my back got hurt, and like, no fault to theirs, because a lot of doctors, a lot of stuff, haven't necessarily been trained on a lot of movement standpoint. They may know a specific amount of what they know in their field because they obviously went through medical school, went through those things, but they may not have the expertise in this same realm. And so what they're oftentimes the common advice is that, well, stop doing that, right? Like stop running, stop deadlifting, stop doing your HIIT workout, stop doing your CrossFit, stop doing your Zumba, right? It's like, stop doing what you're doing, right? And it's like, okay, maybe that's decent advice, but the part that doesn't get factored in is the psychological component of what that does to you, right? And so it's understanding that these are our needs. Okay, so make sure that's right. So these are our needs, these are our wants, okay? And so what I mean by that is usually when it comes to any prescription or any sort of recommendation that comes with it is removing a want. Right? Like, well, you don't understand. I really enjoy going for runs. I really enjoy getting out in nature and connecting and going for hikes. I really enjoy feeling strong and lifting weights. I really enjoy these things. And you're telling me I no longer can, right? Like, we've had more than enough clients come to us and say like, well, my doctor told me I'll never squat again. So your doctor told you you're never going to go to the bathroom again. Like, legitimately, like squatting, you can label it you want, but it's literally sitting down and standing up, right? So what we do is we label them, okay, we're no longer going to squat, we're going to sit and stand, right? Like that's a functional life. Like that's a functionality of life that we need to be able to do as human beings. And so what oftentimes the prescription is, oh, well, that one thing was your problem with it, so we're just going to remove that without looking at the entirety of what is happening. And so what happens oftentimes is, yet again, that's not calling in to the psychological component with that. So you may remove this. You may remove this box, okay? That's the last thing that I recall that happened. So you can remove this. But what happens is the psychological component, i.e. your stress, diet, and sleep, will actually increase because of what you just did. So it's still going to push you over the top. So how many of you are like, okay, I rested, right? I took time away from the gym. I didn't do anything, right? And you felt worse. Right? Like how many times does that happen for you? You did nothing, right? You did everything that everyone told you to do, that all the professionals told you to do. You stopped exercising, you stopped doing this, right? Like you rest, you recovered, you did all these things. Well, probably you were also more stressed, you were probably feeling more agitated, you were probably feeling more moody, you were probably feeling a little bit more depressed, you were probably feeling more anxious. This box was increasing, so in turn it was still pushing over your capacity of what you could currently handle. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, when you see it with athletes all the time of like, well, I rested and I did the thing and I still feel terrible. And it's like, yeah, but you, instead of like resting that part of your body that maybe needed some time to recover, you rested everything and you lost all the benefits that you were getting psychologically, physically, hormonally from exercise. And now you feel that much worse. And same thing, like, and my shoulder didn't feel better, right? And so we have to understand, and this is everything we talk about, that it's not, there's no part of your life where just that one thing exists and nothing else you change matters, right? So you've been there, right? Think about back to a time when you've been injured. What happened if you did take the rest or didn't take the rest, and what was the end result?
So, like I said, these boxes are before you wake up, okay? Now, the importance in what we do, right, like what we have found with Shift is why we work on the entire picture. Why we work on the whole human aspect is because we've seen you can work on this, you can work on this, but if all of these other boxes are expanding and you're not in the best environment, right? Like I'm pretty sure we could probably agree, like the person who has, a 40-minute mindfulness practice, right? Like 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes at night, probably is going to have a different box than this one, right? The person who has a job that they enjoy going to, they enjoy their work colleagues, they feel fulfilled, they feel like they have a place of purpose, they have progress that they see in their 8-hour shift. Their box is probably going to look a little bit different, right? Obviously, the drive is going to be dependent on you. Same thing goes for your exercise regime, right? Like if you're not getting adequate sleep and you're essentially just running yourself into the wall because of all the other elements that we've been talking about for the last week, and you're pushing yourself over the line because you're just doing things that you don't necessarily understand, or you're just following some prescription you found on the internet because your friends were doing it or because it's the new best thing, but we don't understand how that's actually affecting all of this, it's also potentially putting you over the line. So what we do, you guys, is we look at this, okay? So your anatomical deficiencies, though, you can't fix those, okay? Those are already kind of there, right? Like if you have things that are going on, that is what it is, all right? So that box kind of stays the same, and I'm sorry if I don't draw them completely uniform, but that is what it is.
Come on, babe. All right, guys, if you have questions, you're going through this, drop them here. I'm coming and checking the box.
Now, the one part we can work on, so like I said, this happens this happens right when you wake up in the morning. Now, the part that we can really influence right away, you guys, over process and working with people and talking to them and actually getting them onto a systematic approach on this, is we can really work on that stress, diet, and sleep. We can work on getting those hormones back so we can really impact this box. We can cut it in half. We can cut it in a third. We can make massive impact with this box because that's our hormones. That's what we can do with better lifestyle choices, right? And the next one on there, that's your functional diagnosis. You can manipulate this a little bit, right? Like through proper prescription, right? Like through assessment with an actual coach that knows what they're doing, right? Like, oh, you have limited range of motion here. We probably shouldn't be doing that, so let's manipulate that a little bit, right? Like it hurts when you press overhead. Well, let's change that up a little bit so you can still press, you can still get the benefits of strengthening that, you still can get the benefits of the range of motion. We just won't work it in that fashion, right? So we can still manipulate and negate this box down to a smaller portion on it, right? Like, oh, we got discomfort there? Let's move that around a little bit, right? Like we've done that for 10 years inside a group training facility, right? So then on top of that, your drive is what it is, okay?
Or not. Go to quarantine.
Go to quarantine, right? Or you're praying that you could drive somewhere. Your 8-hour shift is what it is. Yet again, you can have talk about being fulfilled, having all the other processes and everything else, but we'll keep that box kind of where it is, okay? And then as you go through, right, you can go through your workout routine. I can squat, I can run, I can deadlift. And yet again, you guys, you can fill this with anything that you do on here. It's just a representation, okay? And look at that. We are under our capacity, okay? So it's like, sweet. Sweet, I went through the whole day. I went through an awesome workout. I was doing all the things that usually cause me pain, cause me discomfort, and I was under the line of my capacity. I mean, obviously you're not gonna talk about that, but I was under, and it felt great, right? Like I felt awesome. I felt strong. I was high-fiving my neighbor around me. It felt amazing. Now, what happens, because it's human nature, right?
We stop.
Well, no, what happens on there is what happens when most people feel good? They add more, right? Like, oh, well now, you know what? Running felt pretty good. I'm going to sign up for my 10K. I'm going to sign up for a half marathon. I'm going to sign up for a whole marathon. I've never felt this good in my life. So what do? We add on top and, oh, that puts us over our capacity. Now, with that, it's like, you know, you go through it like I was there. I was feeling so good. Everything nothing was hurting. I was on a roll. I was good for the last 2 weeks. I was high-fiving everyone. I was so ecstatic to go to the gym, and then I just popped it. But the cool part of working on all of this and having an actual systematic approach that lines out how you go on to move and build and do all those things is you actually increase your capacity. So not only do you work on shrinking these boxes down, but through a systematic approach that is working for you, you actually increase your capacity. So you have more room for error. You have more room so you can add on these things on top of it and still not reach to the point where all of a sudden you tip over and that's the last straw that breaks the back, right? Like when you wake up, right? Like we talked about these 3 boxes, right? Like when you first wake up, you have basically this much room for error. Like this is your room for error initially. When you increase your capacity and you work on these boxes, all of a sudden now you have this much room for error, right? Like you have this much, now you have that much room for error. And so that's why we see what we do, you guys, is we work on all of this. So not only do we already, so just to kind of summary on this, is we all have stuff that we wake up with, right? Like that's inevitable. We all have our own stuff. But what we do is we stack more stuff on top of it. And eventually that pushes us over the line. Now, what we need to do is, on top of that stuff, is we need to increase our capacity faster than we add the other stuff on top of it. And if we can do that and understand how to do that, then we can actually have some room where we can still enjoy what we're doing, get immense benefit out of what we're doing, and still have, and ultimately have sustainable, prolonged progress as we're going through this.
So, I think what's really cool about this is that we can increase our capacity. And if you've listened to like the last 32 episodes, we've been talking about how do we take better care of this? How do we minimize this? And then how do we get to do that, right? Because this is what we see so much with people is like, when, and we were talking about meditation and breath work, right? Like I was on a very regimented routine. Regimented is a bad word, but like it was a thing that I was doing. And everything started happening, and now I'm more in work mode, and I haven't been doing it as much. And I was like, wow, I think it's one of those things that sometimes you don't realize as stress starts to mount until you feel different again, right? Like I didn't realize how much it was helping me until I stopped doing it. And so what's super cool is we can raise one, minimize the other, and all of a sudden you're like, I feel amazing, I'm super happy, life seems easy, right? Like this is all the stuff we talk about in Shift, is this all goes together, and we have strategies and ways that we can help you implement so that you can do all of this at once. And we can even figure out how do you make life more fun? How do we, like, what can we do with all of that stuff? Because, like, goes back to, like, one of our very first videos is, like, you don't need to try to control these things, but you get to create a lot of this stuff in your life, and then everything starts to shift. So it's super cool to understand this and be like, oh, right, when you look back at my shoulder, that's where I hold stress. I've been doing way too many snatches and way too many, like, I was in the midst of, like, just learning my muscle up, and I was doing a lot of movement that wasn't great. I had stress on top of it. I was driving a big lifted truck that didn't have power steering, and I bet that actually was part of it, right? And so like there's all this other stuff. It wasn't actually the Christmas tree. So when you can look at that and you go, okay, what can I create differently, and how do I get to do this? And again, when you work with us, when we can look at your life specifically, we can help shift so much of this stuff.
Well, especially right now, you guys, this box, so oftentimes when we talk to clients that come in the door, is, well, you know what, I don't really have a lot of stress. You know what, I'm handling these things kind of good right now. It's your perceived stress, okay? I want to really kind of let you understand it, right? Like, stress doesn't mean you're pulling your hair out, you're yelling at it. It's your perceived stress. Like all these things add up, right? Like yet again, we talked about just the electrical signal I get from the phone, the lights, my TV, my computer, right? Like how many of you are working from home, so you're in front of your computer screen even longer, right? Like, what's going on with that? You're having to homeschool your kids. You're having to be their coach. You're having to be their best friend. You're having to do all these other things that are stacked on top of it. So your perceived stress also adds up into this, right? Like we talked about the HPA when we're talking about nourishment. All of that goes to increase this box. So how many of you guys are out there right now like, well, I haven't really done much, but I'm just aching, right? Like I just hurt, my shoulders hurt, my low back hurts. I.e., those are a lot of places where a lot of people carry stress, right? Like your low back, a stress place, right? Like carry it in your stomach, a stress place. Shoulders, your traps, your neck, stress. If you're not sleeping very well, that's another good indication. Your perceived stress, even though it's not like on a conscious level, somewhere in there is probably eliciting stress within your system.
And it's interesting when you get into your subconscious. We had a breathwork session a couple weeks ago, and this happened now for 2 weeks. So one of our clients is like, every time we do breath work, I realize I have these like aches and pains, right? And I was like, that's just your body giving you a signal and a sensation that you're storing stress there, and there's more that you need to release, and there's more that you need to look at, right? Like when we do breath work, obviously I love breath work. When we do breath work, it releases a lot of that stuff, and it brings awareness to it, right? Everything we talk to you guys about always comes back to awareness. So it's really cool when you can put all of these mental, physical, emotional environment, put all the categories together, and then you start to see how it's playing together. And once you have awareness, then you start to observe it, and then you start to shift it so that it goes back again to working for you. So it's really cool, I know for us, like when we started putting these pieces together, and then you can look back, right? And you can go, oh, okay, that's why all of these things happened at that point in my life, and this is what I get to do to rewrite the story of where I'm going.
So, I mean, with this, you guys, I think the takeaway that it hopefully can illustrate for you guys is understanding the big picture, right? Like it's really understanding the big picture. And we're gonna transition this week and talk about relationships, because I think, especially right now, our relationships are being exposed would be the wrong word, but kind of shown, magnified in a different realm, right? Like whether it's you're missing out on family time, you're missing those kind of things, you're in the same environment as your spouse, you're not able to have your distraction with sports, entertainment, those things, because they're all closed off. But I think with this, hopefully my goal is to give you a better understanding and to really illustrate that all facets of our life affect this. Right? Like it's not just the one last thing, and even though that, like as human nature, that's what we always pinpoint on, but it's understanding that all of things go together. So I want to encourage you, right? Like if you are feeling like, oh, I got the, I'm experiencing these things. I got little pin needles underneath my skin. I don't know what's going on, right? Like I feel snappy. I feel anxious. I feel, I got pain doing certain things that normally I don't feel pain on, right? Like I thought it was cured, and all of a sudden my back pain's back, my knee pain's back. Is because of this. So I want to encourage you and invite you guys, if you are experiencing that, comment below, reach out. We're more than open to talking to you, set up a phone call, do whatever that we can help you through this, because yet again, this was a kind of like aha light bulb moment for us to be able to really see and illustrate like, wow, everything we do literally talks, corresponds, and works together in our life. And being able to see this first and foremost, and if we can work on shrinking these and increasing these, perhaps we can at the same time get better at as we come out of this thing.
Yeah, and if you are watching live and you want to go back and go through these as Brandon talked about them. So go through them and go, okay, this is what my stress work sleep is. This is, go through this stuff and look at it and go, okay, what's really happening and where in my life do I need to pour more energy into decreasing that box so that I can increase capacity. So hopefully that was helpful, you guys. We'll go back and read the comments. I know, Nate, thank you for commenting about sleep. So we'll add sleep into one of the things that we're going to talk about. But yet again, you guys, we're going to talk relationships this week. So romantic relationships, relationships with your kids, relationship with yourself, just all the relationships. So if you guys have things you want us to touch on with that or things that are coming up for you, obviously comment down below or send us a message if you don't want to make it public. We totally get that. We'll share some funny stories about our lives and all those things. So if you didn't go watch last night's video, it's pretty funny. Go watch that. It was literally, we have a lot of funny stories, like opening a business 4 months into knowing each other. But anyway, go watch last night's video. It was super fun. So we hope you guys are having an awesome Sunday. Take care, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Bye, y'all.